Okay, so welcome to this iteration of customer service. Can everybody see my screen okay? Should be a big O. All right, so if you're like most people, chances are you think you already do a pretty good job of getting along with customers. And that's because most of us don't recognize the small things that we say or do that make customers feel they're getting bad service. Now, remember the last time you got bad service? The person serving you probably thinks they're pretty good at getting along with customers too. It's hard to be objective about how we come across to others. So, we want to examine 4 behaviors that you need to pay attention to when you're serving a customer if you truly want to connect with them. If you do your job effectively, you're likely to have a satisfied customer. But researchers have learned that customer satisfaction isn't enough if you want a successful business, because a satisfied customer is not necessarily a loyal customer. In fact, the customer who gives you, say, a 4 on a scale of 1 to 5 is 6 times more likely to shop somewhere else the next time they need that service compared to someone who gives you a 5. So let's think of it this way. A 4 is a satisfied customer, while a 5 is a loyal customer. They keep coming back. They spend more money. They tell their friends about your shop. It has to do with creating an emotional connection. Uh, so, how do you earn a 5 on a customer survey? When customers form an emotional attachment to the people they work with or who work at a particular store because they consistently treat them with respect and kindness, they go from satisfied customers to loyal customers. So, studies show that once that happens, they're willing to drive even a few more miles and even spend just a little bit more money to shop at Big O over a competitor. And that's because decisions people make about where they shop and what they buy are largely driven by emotions, not logic. In generations past, people viewed purchasing items as more of a financial transaction. Is it the best use of my money? How long will this last me? While today, well, it's changed a little bit. New school of thought is more of an emotional experience. Does it make me feel good? Do they make me feel good? Was I treated properly? Uh, sorry, I lost my uh their primary concern is not simply, is this the best use of my money, but how does this place of business and the people who work here make me feel? Let's think Starbucks, right? It's an experience. I mean, shoot, you can go to McDonald's and get a pretty decent cup of coffee for $1.99. While at McDonald's, you're spending $8 for a cup of coffee. Why is that? Because it makes you feel good. Sorry, wrong picture. Okay. It's the sound of the cappuccino steamer with the jazz music or the music playing in the background, right? It's the corrugated sleeve that fits just perfectly over the cup. That's recyclable. It's the you can connect to the Wi-Fi and browse your socials, and it's free Wi-Fi. You can order your fancy drinks like a what is it? A decaf grande caramel macchiato latte frappuccino. It feels cool and trendy. It's an experience. And before you know it, you're having fun. They made you smile and they call you by your name, even if they don't spell it quite right. And before you know it, you're hooked on Starbucks, right? You're a devoted fan. No other coffee shop will do. You're not going to go to McDonald's for a $2 cup. You're going to Starbucks for that $8 cup, right? So that's why 80% of Starbucks' business is actually return customers. They're regular customers that come in every day, if not every week. So there's an area in the brain called the limbic system. It's the emotional center of your brain. When something gets in your limbic system, we form an emotional attachment and we become fiercely loyal to that object or place, even when it makes no rational sense. They're driven primarily by emotion. Okay, so let's take companies that know how to get in your limbic system. Okay, because if they do, they'll get you hooked. Let's think of why do some people choose Skippy peanut butter over Jif, or vice versa? Why do people prefer Pepsi over Coke? Bloomingdale's actually goes to the extent of lightly perfuming the air to make you remember of with baby powder, make you think of your childhood, you know, and make you feel comfortable and basically get into that limbic system of your brain and make you feel emotional connection to that place. So it's the same when you purchase a new car, right? You open the door and that smell of this new car is actually a fragrance that comes from an aerosol can. It's not, nothing about the car smells like that. They just try to get you hooked. So you'll buy more new cars. Okay. You may find it hard to believe the extent people's loyalty goes once they become emotionally connected or attached to something. But your own experience may make you think of it. Let's think. What are you a fan of? You may want to pause this video if you're watching the recording. If you're live, you can't pause it. I'm sorry. What are you a fan of? What would you spend money on regardless of the rationality behind it? What are you dedicated to? So what hobbies or interests might you have? Maybe it's a sport, a singer, a band, a TV show, or a pet, right? If you're honest, you've probably done a crazy thing or two in terms of spending time or money, maybe even becoming slightly obsessed with a particular object or interest. I have an example for you. As many of you may know, I'm a huge gaming fanatic. I love video games. And I've added up my system at one point in time, and I think I was well over $10,000 spent on computer games. That includes software, hardware, whole nine yards. So if you think about it, some of you think that's irrational, and that's exactly what being a fan of. But let's define fan, right? As the Webster's dictionary says, a fan is a person with extreme and uncritical enthusiasm or zeal, or fanatic, right? So a person with your goal should be to turn our Big O customers into Big O fans, Big O fanatics, people that are willing to spend that extra money, that extra time, the extra distance to come to Big O as opposed to one of our competitors. If your goal is to make them love Big O, they'll be extremely loyal. If you want your store to go from good to great, then you need to make it your aim to convert as many customers as possible into fans. According to Gallup research, there are 3 types of customers. We're going to label them promoters, customers, and detractors. Promoters are what the Gallup study calls emotionally satisfied customers. Your fives. We actually have a system that we utilize called the NPS, the National Promoter Score. It's goes off of our surveys that we give to customers after they visit our store. Now, our scale is on 1 to 10. You can check it out on, what's it called? Steve, help me out.
I'm sorry, you just locked me up too. Net Promoter Score.
Yeah, where can we find our Net Promoter Score? I'm pulling a blank.
March
What is it? Qualtrics. It's Qualtrics.
Qualtrics.
Yep. You can visit your Qualtrics
We
site.
got there together.
Yep, and see your net promoter score, which is NPS, Net Promoter Score. It's very much the similar of this right here. Okay, so you have your promoters on our NPS. It is 8s, 9s, and 10s. You have your customers, which is our 6s to 8s, and then you have your detractors, which are 5s and below, according to our NPS scale. And actually, I think a 7 and 8 is your customers, and then 6s and below is your detractors. So what do these mean? Let's talk about promoters. Okay. Promoters are emotionally satisfied customers. Your 5s, the 8, the 9s, and the 10s. They are the customers that love your store, and they're going to come back. They're going to spend that extra money. They are the fanatics of your store. That is your promoters. They promote your store, right? Your customers, they're okay. They think your store is okay. But if they're passing by another facility and they remember, oh, I need that, then they're going to stop by there. So they'll shop whatever's convenient. Maybe they may be it's on their way to work or on their way home from work. So, and then we have the detractors. Detractors are what we would call emotionally dissatisfied customers. Your 6s and below, according to our NPS. According to Gallup, it's 2s and below. They're the ones that we really, really don't want, right? And it's not that we don't want them. We don't want them to be in that category. We would much rather have them, if anything, in the customer category, but ideally in the promoters category. Okay, so what percentage? Take a moment to think about it. What percentage of your customers would you classify as promoters, as customers, or as detractors? Go ahead and take a few moments. For those of you watching us recording, you can pause the video. For those of you online, I'll give you a few moments. Oh, I just zoomed in. Ooh, crazy, crazy. All right. Think about some examples of each of these as well. You know, how do you think, which ones come to mind, and how do you think these different types of customers will actually impact your business? Okay. Now, I'm not sure exactly what numbers you all put to what category, but if you have more than 10% in the detractor category, and some of you may have put it a lot higher than that, then it's costing you a fortune in lost revenue and bad word of mouth. And you know, today, word of mouth is everything. It's not you tell one person if you had a good time, you tell 10 person if you had a bad time. It's you tell one person if you had a good time, you 10 million people if you had a bad time. The internet can be a good thing and a bad thing. So we got to keep that in mind as well. So, unhappy customers are more difficult to deal with as well. So it's worth doing everything you can as many people as possible in the promoter column. It means higher sales, which means more hours for associates, and of course, job security. It means better place to work because happy customers tend to make your job easier. So this Gallup study concluded that promoters will typically increase your revenue by 23% in comparison to rationally satisfied customers, the regular customers. And detractors will actually decrease from your revenue by 13% in comparison to those regular satisfied customers. So figure out how much your typical customer spends per visit, and you can do the math. If you get a large percentage of detractors into the promoter column, that will have a huge and enormous impact on your business. So now it's the time to address the critical question. How do you make these emotional connections with your customers, right? That's why we're here. So what role do you play? And what specifically do you need to do? So for the rest of this, we're going to examine the 4 opportunities you have to make or break that emotional connection. Number 1, we've got attitude. Number 2, we've got communication. Number 3, we've got performance. And number 4, how do you handle service failures? So let's start with what is clearly the most important of the 4, your attitude. So your attitude, the kind of attitude that will harm your chances of connecting with the customer, we're going to call disinterest. When you come across as impersonal, indifferent, rude, or insincere, you'll create that disconnect if you are any of these. Okay, so let's take some time to analyze the types of things that communicate a bad attitude to our customers. Have you ever had a customer at a store or a restaurant or some other place of business where the person serving you had a bad attitude? Because I know I have. What tips you off that someone has a bad attitude, right? Let's think about that for a moment. What kinds of things did the person with the bad attitude say or do that turned you off, that made you go, I don't know if I really want to do that? Feel free to pause the video if you need a few moments. So when you think about what a bad attitude looks like, I'm guessing what came to mind was more things like tone of voice, facial expressions, bad posture. This lovely lady in this picture right here, I think we've all done that once or twice, right? So it's funny how somebody can do their job properly, even say the right words like, have a nice day, and clearly have a bad attitude. So isn't it enough to just do your job and do it right, or simply say all the right things? It's something in the way you do your job and the way you talk to customers. Okay. And it may even be what you do or don't say that makes a customer feel like you're disinterested. If you truly want to improve your attitude towards customers, it starts by recognizing that a bad attitude is more about you than the customer. So why do I say that? Because 2 associates can have the same job in the same store, and one associate genuinely enjoys serving the customers, while the other associate is irritated and, quite frankly, doesn't care. And now I know you're all thinking of someone and or pointing fingers, but let's take a close look at what shapes someone's attitude. What are some of the reasons a person would have a negative attitude at work to begin with? Well, the first factor is the attitude towards your job. Gallup poll actually found that 77% of employees hate their job. Now, that figure seems a little high, so let's drop it to 50%. And since hate is such a strong word, let's say 50% of workers are not satisfied at their job. All right. So what if that's true in your store? How many employees work there? And how many of those employees with a wrong attitude does it take to upset a customer? If you said 1, you're right. It only takes 1. So what can be done? Well, let's ask a more fundamental question. Why do people not like their job? Like the overwhelming majority point to a rational problem with either their boss or their coworkers. The most important of these relationships is your boss. The number one complaint among unhappy workers is their boss doesn't recognize, respect, or reward their efforts. The number two complaint is that feeling that coworkers gossip or talk behind their back, or that they never help at all. So make a commitment to do everything possible to work together as a team and treat each other with respect. But I'm going to talk to you about something that you can begin doing all on your own. The biggest factor in determining whether you have a good or bad attitude is your general outlook on life. Now, according to a psychological research, workers have three options when regarding their outlook on life. Let's take a look at what we like to call the victometer. So, the victometer, some people have a victim mentality, okay? So, some have a survivor mentality, and some have a navigator mentality. Those with a victim mentality, the 20% there at the top, think have a when things get tough, they immediately start thinking things like, why me? These things always happen to me. Life is so unfair, or I'm so unlucky. And perhaps the most common trademark of a victim mentality is the person feels that there is nothing that they can do about it. It is just happening to them. In other words, they forfeit control of their life to others or to their circumstances. Other people are at fault, and they say things like, that person really makes me mad, or that person totally ruined my day, or they don't actually say it, but they think it. Yeah, we all know those people. The second attitude you can develop towards life, and by far the most popular, is the survivor mentality, representing about 60% of the population. Maybe you can relate to this. You're just trying to survive. You're hanging in there. In fact, when people ask, how are you doing? That's exactly what you say. Hanging in there, getting by, or another day, another dollar. You're just putting up with life. When someone asks you, hey, how's the job? You say, it pays the bills. Or when someone asks, hey, how's your wife? You might say, still married. How's the kids? Well, 4 more years and they'll be out of here. You know what I'm talking about. When you start talking like that, it's a dead giveaway you've adopted a survivor mentality. You're just putting up with things. You're progressed a little further than a person with a victim mentality, but only because you're in denial about your unhappiness, or at least you try not to complain too much. But if you really want to have a good attitude at work, you need to become a navigator in life. The top 20% there. They don't wait for things to happen. They make things happen. They take ownership and responsibility for their own happiness, the quality of their relationships, and their attitude. This represents the Martin Luther Kings of the world, the Abraham Lincolns, the Mike Rowe's, the Oprah Winfrey's of the world. Rather than being brought down by negative circumstances, these people are determined to triumph over the difficulties by sheer determination and a positive attitude. There's one more thing to address that can affect your attitude towards a customer. Well, and that's bias or prejudice. And I know this might be a little bit touchy, can be scary, but sometimes it's often unconscious bias. Now, some of you may have caught yourself thinking this. Customer pulls into the parking lot in a beat up, run down, we'll just say a Ford Pinto. Some of you old timers just laughed. We all think to ourselves, this guy ain't gonna buy nothing. This thing's about to fall apart. He hasn't spent a dime on it. What is that? Biased. Okay. So we're not going to talk about that kind. That is conscious. bias. We're going to talk about the unconscious bias. Okay. The ones where we're not even aware of certain prejudice that we may have. Maybe it's the way someone's dressed or the way they talk, and it's in the back of our head, or their age or their race, nationality, the whole 9 yards, right? Dangerous thing about bias is it actually alters the way we see things. Let's take a look at the following 3 phrases that I'm going to put up on the screen and try to memorize them. I'm going to give you about 6 seconds. All right. Feel free to pause the video. I'll also give you a little bit of time. Try and write that down from memory. So did you guys get Paris in the spring for the first phrase, bird in the hand for the second phrase, and once in a lifetime for the third? What'd you get, Steve? Is that what you got? Victoria, that's what you got too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a look at those phrases again, because there's actually an extra word in each one of those phrases. Did you guys catch that? Yeah. So
Not at
if you're
all.
like, huh?
Not at all. Didn't notice.
Yeah. If you're like most people, then yeah, you didn't actually catch that it says Paris in the spring. Um, bird in the hand. Once in a lifetime. So you make up your mind ahead of time because you were already familiar with these phrases. You thought you knew what they said without really looking carefully. You saw what you expected to see, which prevented you from seeing what was really there. This is how biases or prejudice, just lost myself, how biased and prejudice work. Yeah, the unconscious type. We judge people because of stereotypes we hold on to, and we start seeing the stereotype rather than the real person. Most people have a hard time admitting to this, but the truth is it affects our perception of reality. We don't see things the way they really are anymore. What are some of the bias or prejudice that might affect your attitude towards a customer? Think of as many examples as you can. Feel free to pause if you are on the recording. All right. So let's bring this all back around full circle to creating a customer loyalty, right? So when it comes to attitude, if we want to make an emotional connection with the customer, all customers, then we need to lose the bad attitude and show enthusiasm, a genuine desire to help our customers about our job. And no matter who they are, we are excited to be there. I mean, shoot, if we think back to phone training, how many times do we say, smile on the phone, make people think we love what we do? Not hard for some of us, apparently rather difficult for others. So that this creates a positive experience, and you especially appreciate this when you need something out of the ordinary. You have a special dietary need, maybe, right? If we can make an emotional connection with the customer, we're all customers, then we need, right. Have you ever been to a restaurant, a hotel, and the person serving you truly wanted to help you and meet your needs? I think we can all relate to that one, you know. Let's say, you're especially appreciative that when you need something out of the ordinary, like a special dietary need, and when you get your food, you say, can I order something else? I didn't realize this had, like, I hate spinach. So if I didn't realize it had spinach on it. And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. It'll just take a minute. We want you to be happy. That's the place you want to go back to. That's the place that we continue to go back to. And actually, a really, really good example I have of that is my youngest daughter, from about 6 months old to about 2 years old. She had a tree nut allergy. And one place that I am a huge fan of is Red Robin. I absolutely love Red Robin. And one of the biggest reasons why is because my daughter, with this tree nut allergy, every time we would go in, we would say, our daughter has a tree nut allergy. And they had a whole station dedicated in the kitchen for tree nut allergies, where nothing that was even remotely close to tree nuts was allowed to go. And they always cooked tree nut allergies at that station. It was awesome. It was amazing. And they didn't give a fuss. They never said, "Oh, great, now we have to, clean things," and nothing. No, they just did it. It was awesome. It was wonderful. I loved it. So, enthusiasm, attitude, being happy, being respectful. So, since attitude's not something you can fake, let's take a closer look a little bit at what it takes to develop a good attitude. As a starting point, consider the question we brought up earlier. Why is it that two associates can be dealing with similar challenges? Same boss, same fellow employees, same type of customers. One's rolling their eyes, irritated, swearing under their breath, while the other is calm, friendly, and helpful. Well, it makes you realize it's not really the customer that creates the bad attitude. It's the way the associate is looking at things. Our attitude is controlled by our thoughts, something psychologists call explanatory style. We have a choice in how we explain things that happen to us. The habit of explaining things negatively or positively shape the way we see things. People have a tendency to look at life with one of two dominant styles. We're going to refer to this phenomena as perpetual lens. Some people have a skeptical lens, which means they personalize, they catastrophize, or they finalize. And then the expectant lens, contextualize, compartmentalize, and temporalize. So, skeptical lens, they tend to be a little more pessimistic in the way they explain things. Some people have an expectant lens. That is, they tend to be a little more optimistic in the way they explain things. So let's take a closer look. Keep in mind, these two types of people are facing the exact same events. Maybe they're both stuck in traffic, or they're both stubbed their toe getting out of bed, or they find out they owe $100 to the IRS, or the rush came in right as the other guy went to lunch. We've all been there. So they will view it differently. The first difference is how they look at the origin of the problem. The person who has a skeptical lens is going to personalize their difficulties. They see things like, why me? These things always happen to me. Somebody's up there doesn't like me. I get all the bad breaks. Oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it, right? It's always happening to me. While the expectant lens will say, they look at the circumstances like, let's not take this personally. It really could happen to anyone. How can I make the best of things or avoid this in the future? They're both in the same situation, but giving it different explanation. Second difference has to with how they view the extent of the problems. The person with the skeptical lens is going to be inclined to catastrophize their difficulties, or in other words, they make it far worse than it actually is. The problem overshadows everything. The printer paper gets jammed and doesn't the tire techs aren't working as fast as they normally do, and they might say things like nothing ever works around here, or nobody ever works around here, or when they have a disagreement with a supervisor, they think, man, that guy's such a jerk, and managers are so insensitive. Anybody laughing at this point? But in all seriousness, whatever happens is a big issue that spoils everything. Whereas someone with a more expectant lens might say to themselves, my manager is acting like a jerk. He's probably having a bad day. They look for ways to compartmentalize their difficulties and improve the situation. And the final difference is how they look at the duration of the problem. Someone with a skeptical lens tends to finalize their disappointments. They'll never learn about all these skews. I'll always get a bad schedule. In their mind, they don't just fail, they are a failure. If they didn't just lose, they're a loser. They don't just have difficulty understanding something, they're just plain stupid. In other words, it's permanent. While with an expectant lens, it's short term. They'll temporalize it. I'll get over this. Tomorrow's another day. I'm not stupid. I just need to give it more time. And they move on. Some of you might be thinking, isn't there a place for healthy skepticism, though? Well, I mean, I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. Well, the expectant lens sounds like wishful thinking, right? And that's a good point. That let's make sure that we differentiate between expectant lens and blind optimism. What we mean by an expectant lens is someone who has a firm grasp of reality. They can honestly say, this situation stinks, but what can I do about it now? What can I do to make the best of this situation? If you want to have a good attitude at work, you have to learn to explain things in a more expectant way, including the more challenging customers that may come your way. If you talk to yourself differently, you won't feel as helpless, pessimistic, and you can typically make the situation better. How do you break the habit of seeing things through a skeptical lens and start seeing them more expectantly? Good news is the lenses, these ways of looking at life are learned and can be relearned. Breaking a habit involves reconditioning and the repetition of new thought patterns. Acquiring the habit of looking at the challenges of life with a more expectant lens can be accomplished by utilizing a technique called the TREC analysis. It works like this. First, you separate the triggering event from your reactions to those events. It's important to remember that the triggering event, like an angry customer, is not what causes you to get stressed out. What causes the stress is your reaction. If you're thinking, why do I always get these kind of customers? And the store manager is probably going to hear about it, then you will certainly be anxious and uptight. But part of learning to maintain a better attitude is recognizing the effects of reacting negatively are usually undesirable. You're likely to get a headache or an ulcer, and none of us want that. It won't fix the problem, and it might even add to you becoming more irritable with customers as a result. So, final effects, right? And the final result, constructive response. I lost my, sorry. So the final step, constructive response, is to consider how you might reframe your thoughts to get a more positive outcome. For instance, instead of thinking, why do I always get these kind of customers? Suppose you told yourself something like, is it really my fault because there was no way to anticipate this situation? I just need to do the best I can and have a good attitude, and the customer will probably be more understanding. Try and think through a typical scenario that might get you upset in your role and consider ways you might respond more positively by using the TREC analysis. Next thing we're going to talk about is communication, the difference in self-centered communication and other-centered communication. Style of communication that will weaken the customer connection is self-centered communication. When you talk more than you listen. We all love to buy things, right? But here's the strange thing. If we love to buy things so much, why do customers hate salespeople? Because salespeople seem to be pushy, self-centered, and annoying. We all can agree on that, I think. They have their own agenda, and rather than focusing on what you want as a customer, they seem to be focusing on what they want as a salesperson, the sale. They talk at you instead of to you, and they rarely listen. Sometimes customers in your store can feel exactly the same way when it seems like it's more important for you to do your job than to meet their needs. So, can you think of a situation where your customers might feel like they're being processed rather than served, or talked at rather than talked to? Feel free to pause the video. So, if you want to make a favorable impression on other people, you need to be more concerned about them than you are about yourself. It's when you listen more than you talk. Um, think about some of the people that you like to be around, right? So, who do you like to be around? What makes them enjoyable, right? How you may find that they show interest, friendly, common interests. Um, Maybe they show respect, understanding, affirmations. Maybe they're positive, uplifting. Maybe they have a sense of humor. Think about all of that so that you can apply it when you are working with customers. Next thing we're going to talk about is unremarkable performance. When a customer experience is ordinary, can you think of an ordinary customer experience that you've had recently? Do you have a story to share about it? Well, probably not, because it was ordinary, right? Unremarkable. There's nothing to comment on. The kind of customer service we want is outstanding performance. When there is something unique and extraordinary about the service that you offer. We used to have a saying, wow every customer you see. When was the last customer that you wowed, where they were walking out of the store going, wow, that was really something else? Because those kind of customers are the customers that will tell your story. They will talk about your store. Those are the loyal customers that we want. The customers that tell your story will come back to tell it again. And the last thing, the thing that can make or break everything that we've just talked about, is the way we handle service failures. Service failures very well can occur. It happens. We're in retail. We are in the business of customer service. And unfortunately, we'll have things go wrong. How you handle that will determine whether or not a customer comes back. So take ownership. When you listen, apologize, make things right. So the art of listening, the goal is to understand what the customer is going through, not necessarily agree. Invite that other person to talk first, and don't talk over them. Don't interrupt. Make the other person feel safe. Remember, it's an emotional connection with the customers of today. Confirm a proper understanding. A great way to do this is by repeating back to them what they said in your own words. You can repeat the key words, but summarize it. And then apologize to that customer and compensate them in whatever way. And eventually, you'll turn that customer around. Just got to be positive attitude, and listen to them.